Dr. Flannery, welcome to the podcast.
I'm glad to be here.
So you alluded to the world being in a loneliness epidemic. What do you mean by that?
Well, so for the last close to 50 years now, there's been recognition that human beings, and certainly in the United States where I come from, more and more people are lonely. And basically what we mean is that the very basic human need to feel connection and closeness to other people, more and more people are saying those fundamental needs are not getting met. And that's what they would say, I feel lonely. So right now in the United States, over 40% of adults say, I feel lonely, meaning that they don't have people they can reach out to, they don't feel connected, they feel kind of isolated and kind of on their own and are really suffering because they don't have that connection.
Like generationally, do you see that there's a big difference in how that's represented?
Yes. Okay, so let me backtrack a minute. There's loneliness, which is the human experience of not having your basic needs met, right? That you're all by yourself. Related to that is a more objective consideration, which is social isolation, which has to do with how many people do you talk to in a day, how much are there people you can reach out to if you need help, who can you talk to and not have to worry about it, who will be supportive of you. So it's a more objective kind of thing. And related to social isolation is whether you're willing to engage in various social activities like going to church is actually one. That's on the decline. Being engaged in volunteer organizations, anything involving other people. And the lonelier you are, the less of that you do, and so you get socially isolated. Social isolation and loneliness overlap. If you're socially isolated, you're likely to experience loneliness, but loneliness has to do with how you feel about your needs getting met. And it turns out that some of the most socially isolated people are seniors, and but they are not the most lonely. So young people, teenagers, young adults, are the most connected, partly due to their devices. Okay, there are more people, they talk to more people, they interact with them, but they're actually more lonely than the seniors are.
Really?
Yes, indeed. All right. So, and okay, here's another thing about loneliness. You can actually feel very lonely, but not recognize that you're lonely. Okay, so you might not recognize that you're not getting the connection that you need, and your perceptions about things get skewed, and so you would not, unless someone bothered to ask and perhaps give you a definition, you might not recognize that you actually are lonely.
So just on that, are these people coming and self-diagnosing? The 40% that you talk about, which if it's 40% positively saying they're lonely, you can imagine that number is probably actually significantly higher of people that are sort of in that.
Okay, I'm sorry. It could be higher.
Yeah.
All right, but if you're a serious social scientist, you would go and ask these questions. And so that is based on people actually getting a representative sample of people and asking them about this, okay, and giving them a definition. So it's more accurate about that, but no one comes. Okay, let me rephrase this. Okay, so people who are lonely have some serious psychological difficulties oftentimes that stem from that. They're anxious, they're depressed, they don't have satisfying relationships. There's a lot of things that they would be very unhappy about, but they wouldn't necessarily recognize that it's a consequence of loneliness. So you might ask them and they would not say, oh, I'm lonely. And they certainly don't come to me saying, I'm lonely, so that's why I'm coming in. They'll say, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, I don't have friendships, I can't get any girl to marry me. Okay, and it might stem back to the fact that they are lonely and don't have the skills to be able to reach out and connect to people.
Right. So, and when you're having a conversation with someone that's struggling with loneliness, what are common symptoms that people don't often recognize in their own personal lives?
Okay, let me backtrack a minute here. Okay, really, no one is coming to get help, and loneliness is not a disorder.
Right. Yeah.
It's a human experience, and most of us have it at times. and sometimes you don't even know. So I am a clinical psychologist. I'm supposed to be self-aware. Okay, but I had a period of time where I was experiencing lonely, in part because I was working remotely for so many, during the pandemic, and I was feeling kind of vaguely at unease, dreading going to work. My mood was a little bit on the low side, not really depressed. I wasn't as productive. It was hard to get things going. It's like, what is happening? There's nothing that would really account for this until I realized how little contact I had with other people, and I was actually lonely because I wasn't connecting up with my colleagues. I wasn't getting together with our neighbors and our friends and stuff like this. And so you'll have these consequences of anxiety and depression and, discomfort and feeling things aren't quite right and all of this without realizing that it stems from being so disconnected from other people.
And devices are almost filling the void of that, or are devices almost creating the void?
Okay, I would say, this is my view, okay, the promise of our devices is that you're going to be more connected than ever before 24/7. That's part of the appeal. Well, first of all, we're not designed to be connected like that 24/7. But the nature of the connection actually adulterates authentic connection to other people. It's kind of like a watered down version of things. So if you send out a text or an email, I wasn't going to say podcast, but if you send out
that's fine.
if you send out something like this, you may be sending it out to dozens of people, hundreds of people, but the feedback, the response to it is going to come in at different times from different people, and it's unpredictable. It's not like a conversation like we are having.
Yeah.
Okay? I say something, you listen carefully, I think, and then you say something in response to that, and I consider what you're saying and try to frame something back to you. It's occurring in actual time. We call that synchronous communication. All right, and that's actually what conversation generally is. What I was describing with emails and texts and things like that is asynchronous communication. Okay, in other words, it's not connected in time. So you say something, you text something, and you send it out into the ether, and at some point in the future, it might come back to you, but who knows what it is or where it's coming from or what was put into the response back to you. So it's not really a conversation. It's kind of a watered down version of that. And it turns out that engaging with people in actual time, the synchronous communication, you feel better, you feel connected. There are a lot of positives associated with that. But if you're trying to communicate asynchronously, like the emails and the texts and all this kind of stuff, you actually start to feel worse. And you can kind of scroll through things trying to get more, search more information, search through all kinds of things. And actually, we have a term for it. I don't know if you use it here, but it's called Doomscrolling.
Guilty.
Oh. Okay, it's a familiar term, right? And you can get started on this, go down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, and you look up and you've spent an hour and a half feeling way worse without really gaining very much, and certainly not feeling more connected.
You essentially, in an article that you've written, describe how digital tech conditions the brain for shallow reading versus deep engagement, scanning just the first few lines before scrolling.
Yeah, you hit one of my pet peeves here.
Go on.
Okay, I am a compulsive reader. I do have a condition called obsessive reading disorder.
Lucky you.
Maybe. So the hallmarks of this are that if you leave home, you have to take a backup book with you in case you finish that one. Okay.
I take 2 phones with me
That is not to say at all.
in case one runs out of charge.
Right. And, you go into a bookstore and there are all these books crying to be purchased. Okay. You can't just leave them there. You have to adopt them. That's another sign. So it's not that you don't have enough shelf space. You just got to get more bookshelves. It's not like you have too many books. You got
Right.
Okay. Back to the serious point, which has to do with how we read. All right. So pre-digital, we knew how people would scan a page to get the information from it. Okay, so if you imagine you're looking at an actual page, a book, 8.5 by 11 essay or something like this, I'm going to use my hands here like you can, well, anyway, so you read and your eyes jump across kind of erratically. They're called saccades, and you kind of jump across the book, okay, the line, and you kind of go across and then you drop down to the next line and you steadily go down the page kind of jumping like this. It's a little erratic and non-predictable, but the general trend is across the line and then down the page. All right, that's an actual piece of paper. If you're trying to read the same text on a screen, your tablet, your computer, your phone, whatever it is, the pattern that you develop is actually more sampling across the page. So you look at something, you see a word or two, and then you have to decide, do I want to spend more time on this or do I want to jump? And most times you're jumping. So you go across the page, particularly at the top, and you're jumping and getting a quick dose of information, which you have to decide if I want to give more attention to, and then you move down to the next. So okay, so you go bump, 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 and then you go down the next, and you're again jumping up and down, okay? And then after a few lines, instead of going all the way across the page, you start jumping down the lines, and then about 2/3, you're likely to stop and move on to the next page.
And can I just ask on that? Why is that? Is that just the nature of how we use devices as opposed to working methodically down a page of text? Like, why do we treat one, like a page from the book, the different to if, the old Kindles,
Okay.
which were innovative reading devices, but...
So I this is somewhat speculative, okay? You're quickly grasping little doses of information. And when you're looking at the text, there's hypertext, you might have notifications jumping up, you might have various things. So the very thing you're trying to fully grasp is interrupting you. Okay. Okay. So we thought that if you included hypertext in a thing that you were reading, that would be good because you could readily access the information about the particular term or phrase that is highlighted, okay? But basically what that does is it interrupts your flow of information, taking it in. You go to that and you have to decide, do I really want to see this or not? And then you jump back.
It's chaos.
It's encouraging rapid acquisition of information where you're getting some, but not the deep engagement to really get all of that information and bring it into your, where you can work on it internally. Okay, let me get didactic. I'm being a little nerdish about this. Okay, when we take in information, we take it in through our senses, and it's rather crude. It's this color, it's this sound, those are little pieces of information that come into us through our senses. To get it into your brain in the long-term memory where you can really use it and connect it to other things that takes a lot of processing. It's slow. So you take in your senses, and then if you want to process this information, you have to put it in short-term memory for a while. And you process there and decide if you want to move it on to long-term memory. All right, but if you don't pay attention to it right away, you lose the information. It quickly fades. But there's always more coming. There's always more coming. So if you want to get information that's important to you and you want to get it into your brain where you have these organized, coordinated things of thoughts and feelings and action urges and memories and your emotions and all of this kind of stuff, you have to do a lot of processing, and that takes time. And so slowing down the input of information allows you to do that processing until you get into long-term memory. Why do you want to get it in long-term memory? Well, because your higher order faculties, how you analyze things, how you weigh the pros and cons, things like wisdom and prudence and good judgment and empathy, all right, and wisdom, okay, yes, we can do this, but should I do this? Okay, you have to get it into your long-term memory to be able to make things like that. If what you're doing is jumping across, you just get reinforced for jumping and getting little pieces of information, and it doesn't lend itself to really deeply analyzing the information and relating it to other things that you know already.
Right.